20 Ways Americans Had Fun During the Great Depression. During a time when millions of Americans faced unemployment, crop failures, and even evictions, could joy possibly exist? The answer is yes. Despite all the hardships, Americans found unique and creative ways to entertain themselves and shake off daily worries. Today, we're going to look back at 20 ways Americans found joy during those challenging years. Let's begin this nostalgic journey. Watching dance marathons, where contestants danced until they dropped. Before reality TV existed, Americans flocked to dance marathons to watch strangers do unusual or dangerous things for money and attention. These competitions began in the 1920s as part of the endurance contest craze. However, when the Great Depression hit, dance marathons weren't just a form of entertainment for spectators. They became an escape, a glimmer of hope for the contestants themselves. For many participants, these contests were not only a physical challenge, but also a chance to get food, shelter, and an opportunity to win cash prizes. In a time when 15 million people couldn't find work, and millions struggled to survive. Having 12 meals a day at waist-high tables on the dance floor, along with 15-minute breaks every hour for a nurse to tend to or massage their feet, was an incredible luxury. Contestants had to keep moving for the remaining 45 minutes of each hour. Some even learned to sleep while their partners held them up and dragged them across the dance floor. If a sleeping dancer's knee touched the floor, the couple would be disqualified. For added safety, dancers sometimes tied their wrists behind their partners' necks before falling asleep. The physical danger of dance marathons was precisely why people paid to watch them. Audiences were captivated by the drama, the desperation, and the sheer grit of the contestants. Despite rumors of promoters cheating to favor certain couples, the sight of exhausted people collapsing into each other's arms at the 1934 walkathon in Washington remains a testament to their suffering and determination. By the late 1930s, these contests gradually faded due to increasing criticism and laws banning them in many parts of the country. However, during their toughest times, they provided both entertainment and a glimmer of hope for those fighting to survive. This shows that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit always finds a way to rise and seek a little bit of light. Exploring haunted houses. The Halloween traditions we know today, including trick-or-treating, costume parties, and haunted houses, really began to flourish during the Great Depression as a way to keep young people out of trouble. October 31st had long been a night for mischief. However, after a particularly bad Halloween in 1933, when hundreds of teenagers across the country overturned cars, sawed down telephone poles, and committed other acts of vandalism, many communities began organizing Halloween events for children and teenagers to prevent this kind of destruction. Parents tapped into their creativity to create spooky haunted houses without spending a lot of money. A 1937 party handbook offered advice on how to create a path of horrors. Hang old furs, strips of raw liver on the walls, where people have to grope their way to dark stairs. Eerie sounds like groans and howls emanated from dark corners, and damp sponges and hairnets hung from the ceiling, brushing against passers-by. Entrances were blocked, forcing guests to crawl through a long, dark tunnel. These homemade haunted houses not only brought joy and excitement to children, but also created opportunities for families and communities to collaborate, using their ingenuity and imagination during a time of scarce resources. It clearly demonstrated the spirit of making do with what you have, or making something old new again, creatively reusing materials to create fun. For our older viewers, the image of parents back then doing their utmost to bring joy to their children in difficult circumstances will surely evoke deep emotions about family values and resilience. Lining up to watch flagpole-sitting. Another endurance challenge from the 1920s that continued its popularity during the Great Depression was flagpole-sitting, that is, sitting atop a pole for as long as possible. The originator of this trend, was a Hollywood stuntman named Alvin "Shipwreck" Kelly. In the summer of 1930, up to 20,000 people came to watch Kelly eat, sleep, and shave atop a 225-foot flagpole in Atlantic City for 49 days. That same summer, children across the country quickly took part in a tree-sitting challenge where they tried to stay in a tree for as long as possible. One teenager in Southern California reportedly lasted 1,320 hours, which is over 55 days. Like Kelly, these kids devised systems to bring food and other supplies up to their perches. Such activities became a curious symbol of the era, drawing public attention not only for their uniqueness, but also because they showcased an aspect of perseverance and effort which perfectly aligned with the spirit needed during tough economic times. Although the flagpole-sitting craze largely subsided after that summer, it didn't disappear entirely. In 1933, Richard Dixie Blandy set a record of 77 days sitting atop a flagpole at the Chicago World's Fair. These bizarre endurance contests brought joy to viewers through curiosity and the sensation of witnessing something out of the ordinary. For the contestants, it was a way to stand out, perhaps earn a little money, or simply prove their endurance. Witnessing goldfish swallowing and other bizarre contests. Dance marathons and flagpole sitting may have originated in the 1920s, but the Great Depression had its own truly bizarre and unique contest, goldfish swallowing. This craze began at Harvard University in 1939, when some students bet a freshman $10 that he couldn't swallow a live fish. On March 3rd, the freshman made good on his wager by chewing and swallowing a live goldfish in the dining hall in front of a group of students and a reporter. Life magazine reported on the story, and soon after, students at other universities began to try to see how many live goldfish they could swallow. In less than a month, the record jumped to 42 goldfish, swallowed by a member of the class of 1942. And by the end of April, the record was 101. This trend also inspired students to try swallowing other things. College students in Illinois swallowed 5 baby white mice. In Oregon, 139 live earthworms. Quirky contests like these reflected an aspect of the Great Depression spirit, the search for joy in the unusual, even the shocking. Going to see high-tech Hollywood movies, from Talkies to Dazzling musicals. Against the harsh backdrop of the Great Depression, Hollywood actually experienced a relatively successful decade, becoming a fortress of escapism for millions of Americans. Average movie tickets cost just under $0.25 throughout the 1930s, down from 35 cents in 1929. This made movie theaters an affordable form of entertainment, a place where people could temporarily forget their daily worries. This was a revolutionary period for cinema, as films fully transformed from silent films to talkies. Hollywood didn't hesitate to invest in new sound stages and film ideas that fully utilized this groundbreaking audio technology. The result was the birth of big-budget musicals with original songs, such as 42nd Street, 1933, and The Wizard of Oz, 1939. The spectacle of stunning synchronized dances and dazzling performances, choreographed by talented directors like Busby Berkeley, offered a powerful emotional release, helping viewers temporarily escape the gloomy reality. This decade also saw Walt Disney release the first feature-length animated film in history, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937, a classic to this day. Audiences also flocked to see Marx Brothers comedies, screwball, romantic comedies, starring beloved stars like Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, or emotionally charged melodramas like A Star is Born, 1937. In fact, before Hollywood enforced the Hays Code in the summer of 1934 to keep films clean, viewers could even see Marlene Dietrich kiss a woman in Morocco, 1930, or Barbara Stanwyck rising to the top in Babyface, 1933. Although movie attendance did decline when the Great Depression began, The average weekly movie-going rate never dropped below 40%. Building and racing, soapbox cars. Soapbox derby races began in the 1930s as a competition for children that didn't require much money. In 1933, a journalist named Myron Scott noticed some kids in Dayton, Ohio, racing their homemade cars made from soapboxes. He photographed them and began helping them organize larger races. By the end of that summer, these races had attracted up to 40,000 spectators. The following year, Scott convinced Chevrolet to sponsor the first all-American soapbox derby for boys. Girls were not allowed to compete until 1971. After holding local races in the Midwest, 34 winners of those races came to Dayton to contend for the championship. The next year, the championship race moved to Akron, where it has been held ever since. Hundreds of thousands listened via radio to the 1936 All-American Soapbox Derby, held in Akron, Ohio. This was only the third year of the competition, but its popularity soared as America looked for something to cheer for while still grappling with the Great Depression. The All-American Soapbox Derby has been held annually in Akron ever since. This activity wasn't just a game, it was also a valuable lesson in ingenuity, engineering, and sportsmanship for children during tough times. It brought joy through healthy competition, creativity, and the ability to overcome challenges. For parents and communities, it was a meaningful event that brought people together, cheering alongside each other and witnessing the efforts of the next generation. Do you have any memories of playing simple DIY games or participating in similar community events from your childhood? Share them in the comments. Indulging in the lives of the rich and famous, Cafe Society. One of the longest-standing traditions in American history is reading about the tumultuous lives of celebrities. For Americans during the Great Depression, this meant reading about Cafe Society. After Prohibition ended in 1933, former speakeasies in cities like New York transformed into glamorous restaurants and nightclubs, teeming with movie stars, musicians, wealthy individuals who hadn't lost all their money, social climbers trying to maintain their status, and plenty of gossip columnists to document what all these people were doing there. The super-wealthy Vanderbilts were a fantastic source of Cafe Society drama. Photographers followed the single Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt, Jr., to nightclubs, capturing him dating a string of glamorous women. Meanwhile, gossip columnists worried about the supposedly decadent lifestyle of his half-sister, Gloria Mimi Baker, who frequented nightclubs and casinos at just 15 years old. Family dramas outside the club scene also made headlines. In 1934, newspaper readers were shocked by the sensational custody battle over 10-year-old Gloria Vanderbilt. Newspapers dubbed Gloria the poor little rich girl, a moniker they also used to describe other young Cafe Society members like Brenda Frazier and Barbara Hutton. In 1938, 17-year-old Frazier was known as Glamour Girl Number 1 and appeared on the cover of Life magazine before her debutante ball. Readers also followed the troubled love life of Hutton, heiress to a $45 million Woolworth fortune, who married and divorced 2 European royals between 1933 and 1937. Her reaction to a 1939 Woolworth employee protest showed she never truly grasped the extent of her privilege as a Depression-era millionaire. "Why do they hate me?" she reportedly asked. "There are other girls just as rich, richer, almost as rich as I am." Building a real estate empire in Monopoly. That a board game called Monopoly became popular during the Great Depression is ironic in itself, but it's even more ironic when considering the game's origin story. The game's inventor, Elizabeth J. Magie, first patented it in 1904 as landlord's game to teach players about the evils of capitalism. And for several decades, it did just that. However, in the 1930s, another man began selling a board game based on her idea. In 1935, he sold it to the struggling Parker Brothers Company, which then began selling it under the name Monopoly. The game was a huge success for families during the Great Depression because it was a relatively cheap form of entertainment that they could use repeatedly. Furthermore, it might have served as a form of wish fulfillment for those who knew they would never join cafe society. But it also erased Maggi's role as the game's originator. So, while Parker Brothers made enough money from Monopoly to save itself from bankruptcy, Maggi only earned $500 from Landlord's Game. The popularity of Monopoly during this period stemmed not only from its economical entertainment value, but also from its ability to allow players to imagine themselves as real estate magnates, controlling properties and accumulating wealth, a distant dream for most Americans at the time. Reading comics and complaining about their politics. Every Sunday, children across the country eagerly grabbed the newspaper to read the funny pages featuring the adventures of Detective Dick Tracy, Yale polo player Flash Gordon, and Little Orphan Annie, the plucky girl with surprisingly pro-business, anti-labor views. In a 1933 strip, Annie cheerfully exclaimed, "Gee, who says business is bad?" If Annie needed help on an adventure, she'd be rescued by Daddy Warbucks, a benevolent millionaire whose name hinted that he was a war profiteer. Annie's politics reflected the views of her creator, cartoonist Harold Gray. This popular comic strip made Gray incredibly wealthy. By 1934, he was earning $100,000 a year, nearly $2 million in 2019 dollars, since starting it in 1924. Angered by Franklin Delano Roosevelt's election in 1932, Gray used his strip to attack labor unions and the New Deal. The strip was popular with children for Annie's grand adventures, but not all adults enjoyed her politics. In 1935, the New Republic denounced Annie as fascism in the funnies. Reading comic strips was not only an affordable form of entertainment, but also a way for the public to access social and political commentary of the era. While children loved the adventures, adults could read into the implied, sometimes controversial, messages about the state of the nation. Listening to diverse radio programs, comedy, mystery, adventure. Radio was a vital source of news and entertainment during the Great Depression. Throughout this decade, the number of American households owning a radio surged from about 40% to 83%. Each week, Americans gathered to follow masked superhero characters in The Lone Ranger and The Green Hornet, or laugh heartily with comedians like Gracie Allen and George Burns. One of the most famous sitcoms was Amos and Andy, a show criticized for being explicitly racist, which brought minstrelsy-style entertainment with blackface elements to the radio waves. Children especially loved listening to Dick Tracy and Little Orphan Annie, two programs inspired by popular comic strips, and sent in Quaker Oats box tops or Ovaltine seals to join each show's secret club. Americans also tuned into the radio for breaking news, the latest baseball scores, or the hottest Hollywood gossip. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt revolutionized the way presidents communicated with Americans by speaking directly to them over the radio. In his Fireside Chats, he discussed issues like the banking crisis, the New Deal, and the Dust Bowl. The Great Depression era was the golden age of radio. Radio proved it could be a significant force in both politics and popular culture. With the ingenuity of producers and the talent of actors, radio helped millions of Americans forget the difficult conditions of the Great Depression. Enjoying swing and big band music on the radio, the most popular sound of the 1930s was a new type of music called swing. And the king of swing was clarinetist Benny Goodman. Benny Goodman, along with other musicians, made swing music incredibly popular in the 1930s. Swing was a new form of jazz. Many of the genre's earliest artists were black musicians in small, lesser-known groups. It wasn't until more prominent white musicians began playing swing in the mid-1930s that this new musical genre became extremely popular. One reason for swing music's popularity was the growing power of radio in the 1930s. Swing was a symbol of optimism, vitality, and adaptability during challenging times. Its lively rhythm, improvisational nature, and explosive energy brought joy and lifted the spirits of those struggling with economic burdens. Big bands, with their energetic performances, created a cultural phenomenon, helping people temporarily forget the harsh reality and immerse themselves in the music together. Listening to classical music on the radio. Besides swing music, the 1930s also saw an increase in the popularity of traditional classical music by Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, and other great composers. In 1930, the Columbia Broadcasting System began a series of New York Philharmonic concerts on Sunday afternoons. The following year, on Christmas Day, the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, began weekly opera broadcasts from the stage of the Metropolitan Opera House in New York. By 1937, NBC had invited Italy's Arturo Toscanini to conduct an orchestra on American radio. Toscanini was the greatest conductor of his time. Millions of Americans tuned in on Christmas Eve as Toscanini and the NBC Orchestra began playing the first of 10 special radio concerts. This was a wonderful moment for both music and radio. For the first time, millions of ordinary Americans could hear classical music by great composers as it was being performed live. What do you think is most important for art and entertainment forms to endure through difficult periods of history? Let us know in the comments below. Engaging in sports. Sports played a crucial role in bringing joy and unity during the Great Depression, and baseball was the most popular sport in the 1930s. Going to a game wasn't too expensive, and kids playing baseball in the park was completely free. The most famous professional team of the era was the New York Yankees, with legendary players like Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, and Lou Gehrig. These names weren't just sports stars. They were symbols of hope and excellence, bringing pride and inspiration to millions of fans. Besides baseball, miniature golf was also a very popular trend in the early 1930s. It was a simple, low-cost form of entertainment, suitable for all ages, and didn't require much space or complex equipment. It brought joy through gentle competition and the ability to spend quality time with family and friends. College football also became very popular in this decade. Several new bowl games were introduced, including the Orange Bowl, Sun Bowl, Cotton Bowl, and Sugar Bowl. The prestigious Heisman Trophy was awarded for the first time in 1935, marking the sport's growth. Reading books and literature, escapism and social commentary. In the 1930s, most popular books were similar to Hollywood movies, primarily intended to help people forget their troubles rather than confront serious social issues. By doing so, authors also earned more money. This reflected the public's great need for escapism during difficult times, when a captivating story could provide comfort and temporarily pull them away from harsh reality. However, some writers in the 1930s produced books that were both profitable and high quality. One such writer was Sinclair Lewis. His book, It Can't Happen Here, warned of the impending dangers of fascism. John Steinbeck's great book, The Grapes of Wrath, helped millions understand and deeply feel the hardships faced by poor farmers. Erskine Caldwell wrote about the harshness of life for the poor in the southeastern United States, and James T. Farrell and Studs Terkel wrote about life in Chicago. Reading books, whether for entertainment or reflection, was a form of nourishing the soul amidst material scarcity. It helped people broaden their minds, discover new ideas, and feel less alone in their struggles. Enjoying government-funded art and theater. Among the unemployed during the Great Depression were many artists and performers of various kinds. Government programs to support these individuals led to the production of plays and artworks for everyone to enjoy. President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal brought federal support to artists with the view that artists have to eat too. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, hired muralists, writers, theater directors, and actors to continue providing entertainment for the country. The WPA also hired photographers and writers to document the lives of their fellow Americans. Among the products of this effort were oral histories that still inform the work of historians today. Thomas Benton painted workers and others with strong, sturdy bodies. Edward Hopper showed the somber streets of American cities. Reginald Marsh painted scene after scene of the impoverished areas of New York City. The federal government created a job program for artists. They painted their works on the walls of airports, post offices, and schools. The program brought their ideas and creativity to millions. Accessing photography as an art form and documentation. Alongside the development of other art forms, photography also became more important as cameras improved in quality and became more compact and portable. Photographers like Margaret Bourke-White and Walker Evans used their cameras to record the harsh conditions of the Great Depression. Their photographs were not only historical records, but also haunting works of art, telling stories of poverty, resilience, and human dignity in adversity. Alfred Eisenstadt, a German immigrant, regularly had photographs of new events and celebrities on the covers of Life magazine. Alfred Stieglitz was another prominent photographer in the 1930s. He not only helped establish photography as an art form, but also had a major influence through his galleries in introducing pioneering artists from Europe to the public. The 1930s were a particularly productive period for landscape photographer Ansel Adams, who also turned to photographing factories and industrial subjects. Social dancing, jitterbug, and other styles. During the Great Depression, despite life's immense difficulties, social dancing remained one of the most popular and beloved forms of entertainment. Alongside the dramatic dance marathons, lively dances like the jitterbug had their golden age. Jitterbug, with its fast, energetic, and improvisational steps, became a symbol of vitality and joy. It was more than just a dance. It was a way to relieve stress, express energy, and connect socially in a free, exhilarating space. Literary historian Morris Dickstein wrote that, in the 1930s, movement was what art was most concerned with. He described that, in addition to conveying the wonderful joy and grace of movement, dance and film became a metaphor for the need of beleaguered people to connect and bond with one another. Although he referred to dance in film, this reflects a broader need for connection and energy that dancing provided in real life. Attending fairs and expositions. While not daily entertainment, these events held great significance in boosting morale and showcasing national progress. A prime example is the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, also known as A Century of Progress. Here, Richard Dixie Blandy set a record of 77 days sitting atop a flagpole, drawing the attention of thousands. Though just one of many attractions, this event illustrated how fairs were hubs for unique and unusual activities to draw audiences. Large fairs often showcased scientific, technological, and artistic achievements, offering an optimistic view of the future amidst challenging current circumstances. They were places where people could marvel at new things, participate in games and activities, enjoy food, and experience a festive atmosphere. Among the forms of entertainment we've just explored, which one impresses you the most about the resilience and optimism of Americans during the Great Depression? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At-home hames and DIY activities. When money was tight and going out for entertainment became a luxury, American families turned to at-home entertainment methods, often DIY activities or simple, inexpensive games. The phrase, "desperate times call for creative measures," became a guiding principle for many families. Their ingenuity and imagination were put to full use to create joy from what they had on hand. A prime example is how parents used their creativity to create spooky haunted houses without much expense. As mentioned earlier, they utilized items readily available at home or easily found to create play spaces for their children. This wasn't limited to Halloween. Families could play board games together, beyond Monopoly, which was mentioned, solve puzzles, or even tell stories. Evenings spent together, playing a simple game or creating something as a family, became cherished moments. Community events and public gatherings for entertainment. Beyond individual or family entertainment, community events and public gatherings played a crucial role in bringing joy and strengthening unity for Americans during the Great Depression. When personal resources were limited, sharing collective experiences became incredibly meaningful. These events not only provided safe fun, but also created a space for neighbors and friends to participate together, laugh together, and feel the warmth of their community. Similarly, the soapbox derby races, though for children, attracted tens of thousands of spectators, turning them into major community events. People flocked to cheer, to witness the children's efforts, and to share in the pride of their community. The Great Depression was a challenging chapter in American history, but as we've seen, it was also a period where imagination, resilience, and the human spirit rose strong. From dramatic dance marathons to glittering Hollywood films, from classic baseball games to politically charged comic strip stories, Americans proved that joy and hope could be found even in the darkest circumstances. What life was really like in 1900s America. As 1900 dawned, a new century unfolded, promising much, yet still bearing the clear marks of the old era. This transitional moment found America not just a land of golden opportunities, but also a place rife with challenges, with unending struggles to shape an unprecedented future. Join us as we journey back in time to explore an America full of contrasts, where technological progress boomed alongside harsh social realities. From life-changing inventions to unimaginable social burdens, we'll uncover the true stories of an era that laid the firm foundation for the United States we know today. America, a nation of opposites. The year 1900 wasn't just the start of a new century. It was a fascinating transitional period, a vivid snapshot of profound change. On one hand, this era still bore strong resemblances to the 19th century, a time that had passed. Queen Victoria was still reigning over England, a symbol of a vast and powerful empire. At the same time, Isaac Newton's laws of physics were still considered the foundational principles governing the entire scientific world, explaining everything from the movement of celestial bodies to the fall of an apple. This shows that, despite stepping into the new century, societal thought and structure were still deeply influenced by old values and patterns. On the other hand, this was precisely the starting point for great changes, incredible breakthroughs that would shape the future of America and the world. The contrast between tradition and innovation, between the old and the new, is the common thread running through the picture of America in 1900. Did you know that the English language in 1900 was still quite small? It might sound strange, but the truth is that many words and concepts we consider obvious and familiar in daily life today simply didn't exist or weren't widely popular back then. Just imagine words like radio, movie, crossword puzzle, tractor, truck, tank, or electronics had not yet entered the everyday vocabulary of Americans. This not only shows a lack of technology, but also reflects a completely different worldview. When the concept of motion pictures didn't exist, how different would entertainment be? Without radio, how limited would communication and connection methods be? It wasn't just technology. Even important social concepts like camouflage, propaganda, cafeteria, vaccination, income tax, feminists, jazz, gospel, neon light, schizophrenic, or psychotic were not widely known or didn't have the same meaning as they do today. The absence of these words isn't just a linguistic issue. It also reveals a significant difference in how people perceived the world, society, medicine, and psychological issues compared to now. Life was simpler, but at the same time, less understood in many complex aspects. At that time, America was such a vast and dispersed nation that there was no such thing as an average American life. The geographical, economic, and cultural diversity created vastly different living situations. The divide between urban and rural areas was incredibly stark and profound. Although about 250,000 miles of railroad were gradually connecting the states, forming a vital transportation network, in reality, many Americans still lived hundreds of miles from the tracks, isolated from the flow of development and the conveniences that railroads offered. Imagine, in distant northwestern states like Oregon and Washington, rivers were still the primary routes for trade, travel, and freight, reminiscent of an era before railroads dominated. And in the vast wild western states such as Wyoming, Montana, and the Dakotas, remote and isolated farming communities existed in living conditions that residents of the bustling northeastern cities could hardly fathom. Primitive homes, without electricity or running water, and a complete reliance on nature were harsh realities. Modernization was primarily concentrated in the urban areas of the Northeast. This was where gas streetlights glowed brightly, indoor plumbing systems offered convenience, and the bustling life of industrialization was booming. In contrast, most of the country, especially west of the Mississippi and south of Ohio, remained in darkness and backwardness. They had never seen gas streetlights or indoor plumbing, things we consider most basic. This was an astonishing division, showing a huge disparity in living standards and access to modern conveniences between regions. Especially in the South, the economy was still struggling to recover from the severe aftermath of the Civil War, a huge scar on America's map. There was virtually no industrial development in the Deep South, where agriculture remained the main but inefficient pillar. Construction activities, including private housing, lagged far behind the rest of the country, leading to a lack of and underdeveloped infrastructure. By 1900, a sad statistic showed that 9 out of 10 African Americans still lived in the South, and 80% of them worked as sharecroppers, a highly exploitative labor system. The sharecropping system was a harsh reality, a vicious cycle of debt and poverty. Whether black or white, they had to rent land, seeds, equipment, housing, and even food from local landlords. The injustice lay in the fact that landlords had the right to keep secret ledgers, meaning tenants never knew their account status or could question crop prices. As a result, most harvests were not enough to break even, pushing sharecroppers into a never-ending cycle of debt and chronic poverty, a helpless trap. They worked hard, but the profits always remained in the landlord's hands, preventing them from escaping their precarious lives. This is truly a bleak picture of economic and social inequality in America at the turn of the 20th century. Social burdens and reform movements. While technology boomed and new billionaires emerged, the lives of most Americans surprisingly worsened as the nation industrialized. This was a dark side of progress, where individuals became tiny cogs in a massive machine. Workers had virtually no power or voice, exploited without the ability to defend themselves. Harsh working conditions and low wages were pressing issues, pushing millions of families into hardship. Labor unions, organizations that could help protect workers' rights, were often deemed illegal, and those who dared to organize unions were treated as criminals, suppressed, and severely punished. One of the most heartbreaking and agonizing issues of the time was child labor, a cruel reality that robbed millions of children of their childhood. In 1900, a terrifying statistic showed that 1/4 of boys aged 12 to 16 were laborers, meaning they had to work instead of attending school. Most of them worked 12-hour shifts in terrible, dangerous, and toxic conditions. Children had to work in textile factories, mines, or in fields under scorching sun, where sanitation was poor and work accidents were rampant. These jobs not only severely affected physical health, causing respiratory diseases and injuries, but also destroyed children's mental health, depriving them of opportunities for education and holistic development. Many teenagers did not attend school, but worked in factories or fields to earn additional income for their families, a great sacrifice for survival. To better visualize life back then, let's look at the numbers. In 1900, the average annual income for a family was $3,000 in today's prices, a figure that might seem decent but came without any of the basic conveniences we take for granted today. They had no indoor plumbing, no telephones for communication, and of course, no cars for travel. Even more sadly, about half of American children lived in chronic poverty, lacking everything from nutrition to education. This is truly a bleak picture, showing how deeply economic inequality was entrenched in society. However, amidst these social burdens, a powerful wave of reform emerged, bringing hope and promises of fairness. President Theodore Roosevelt, an outstanding and energetic figure known as a progressive, fought tirelessly for a square deal for all Americans. He believed that the unchecked power of large corporations would lead to social instability and injustice, and thus radical solutions were needed to curb them and protect the interests of the people. Roosevelt was the first to challenge the power of industrial and financial tycoons, laying the groundwork for future antitrust regulations and policies. This period also witnessed the strong rise of muckrakers, investigative journalists, brave individuals who exposed the dark underbelly of society and industry, bringing the truth to light. Notable examples include Ray Stannard Baker, Lincoln Steffens, and especially Upton Sinclair, whose shocking novel, The Jungle, exposed the horrific and cruel unsanitary practices in the Chicago meatpacking industry. This book not only rocked American public opinion, but also spread worldwide, leading to the enactment of consumer protection laws and food safety reforms, helping to protect the health of millions of people from contaminated and toxic foods. Social reformers, labor organizations, and religious groups also tirelessly fought to protect children from exploitative labor, a pressing issue. These continuous efforts led to the establishment of the National Child Labor Committee, NCLC, in 1904, a pioneering organization in protecting children's rights. Although the road was long and arduous, these efforts ultimately led to the enactment of important laws such as the Keating-Owen Act of 1916, though later declared unconstitutional for technical reasons, and the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, of 1938, which regulated the minimum age and working conditions for children, largely ending child labor and restoring childhoods to millions of children. What do you think was the biggest challenge for an average American family in 1900, when life was still full of hardships and shortages? Let us know in the comments below. Stepping into a new era, life-changing technology and inventions. Stepping into the 20th century, America didn't just change. It exploded with an unprecedented wave of industrialization and urbanization. This was the era of industrial giants and game-changing inventions. Millions of tons of steel were produced from massive factories in Ohio and Pennsylvania, the country's major industrial centers. This enormous amount of steel transformed names like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie into some of the world's wealthiest billionaires, people with immense influence on the national economy. At the same time, the development of the steel industry also turned cities into modern megacities, with unparalleled scale and population density, becoming magnets attracting rural populations seeking opportunities. And who could forget the visionary architects? Chicago architect Louis Sullivan, known as the father of the skyscraper, pioneered steel frame construction techniques. Thanks to him, buildings as tall as 30 to 40 stories sprang up, creating entirely new skylines for major cities like New York and Chicago, transforming familiar landscapes into symbols of modernity and progress. Steel wasn't just used for skyscrapers, it was also a key material for building vital infrastructure, the lifelines of the economy. We're talking about railroads, streetcar lines, and iconic colossal bridges like the Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and East River bridges in New York, or a bridge spanning the Ohio River in Cincinnati. These structures not only connected regions, but also demonstrated America's superior engineering capabilities. Not just above ground, large-scale engineering projects were also taking place underground, testament to humanity's continuous innovation. Subway systems had appeared in Boston and Paris, providing fast and efficient means of transportation. Notably, in 1904, the Broadway subway line in New York opened, reducing a 3-mile journey from an hour to just 10 minutes. This change not only helped people travel faster, but also completely altered how they worked, lived, and perceived space and time in a large metropolis. And we can't forget Thomas Edison, one of the greatest inventors of all time, who consistently amazed the public with his inventions. From electric lights illuminating every home, turning night into day and extending working and living hours, to phonographs bringing music and stories to every living room, ushering in an era of home entertainment, to the kinetoscope opening the door to cinema, starting the film industry that followed. One could say the modern age seemed to explode right from his humble New Jersey laboratory, a symbol of ceaseless creation and innovation. The advent of the automobile was a historical turning point, a symbol of personal freedom and progress. In 1900, automobiles were still a luxury, with only about 8,000 cars in the United States and less than 10 miles of paved roads, indicating unprepared infrastructure. Cars at the time were considered toys for the rich, symbols of status and power. However, Henry Ford completely changed that perception when he introduced mass production in 1908, a revolution in the industry. This method not only created countless jobs in massive factories, but also helped produce cheaper cars, more accessible to the general public. Ford had a big dream. He wanted to make cars affordable for the average worker so that every American family could own one. This very idea, a groundbreaking vision, turned him into a millionaire and forever changed the face of personal transportation. By the end of the decade, there were over 200,000 cars nationwide, and more than half of them were Fords, proving his remarkable success. The automobile revolution had truly begun, ushering in a new era for personal mobility and freedom. Alongside this were breakthroughs in communication and transportation, narrowing distances and broadening human perspectives. The Kodak Brownie camera debuted in 1900, making photography accessible and affordable. Now, anyone could capture memorable moments of daily life, creating invaluable keepsakes for future generations. This was a significant step in preserving memories and sharing images. Italian physicist Guglielmo Marconi sent the first radio signal from England to Newfoundland in 1901, a crucial milestone in communication history. Although initially having few practical applications, a series of discoveries over the next 5 years turned radio into a reality, ushering in the era of wireless communication, connecting people from afar. Electric train experiments began in upstate New York in 1904, and streetcars had appeared in every major city, significantly improving public transportation, making it easier for people to move around in crowded urban areas. And, of course, one of the greatest events, a dream of humanity for millennia, came true. In 1903, the Wright brothers, humble bicycle mechanics from Ohio, made their historic 12.5-second flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Although this event received little attention in the newspapers at the time, Overlooked amidst countless other news, it opened the era of aviation, forever changing how we travel, perceive the world, and connect continents. In science and medicine, the 20th century also marked incredible progress, though not all of it happened simultaneously. Albert Einstein, a little-known postal clerk in Switzerland at the time, published 3 mathematical formulas that shook the scientific world, establishing quantum theory and ending Newton's era of dominance, ushering in a new era of physics and the cosmos. However, medicine was the most lagging science, still facing major challenges in basic understanding. Deadly epidemics like cholera, diphtheria, and yellow fever still raged due to a severe lack of understanding of how they spread. But an unexpected solution came from the construction of the Panama Canal. When American engineers applied drainage systems to eliminate mosquitoes, the disease-transmitting vectors, health in the region significantly improved, laying the groundwork for modern sanitation systems in major American cities. This was an important lesson on the importance of environmental hygiene and public health, a turning point in the fight against disease. Daily life and entertainment. If you look at daily life, you'll find the pace was much slower than it is now, an astonishing difference. Home life required self-sufficiency and a lot of effort. Everyday tasks were often done entirely by hand, from sewing clothes to save costs, making butter from fresh milk, cleaning the house manually, to hand-washing laundry with soap and brushes. A very time-consuming and laborious job. For laborers and miners, they had to spend most of their day working, with shifts lasting 12 to 16 hours, 6 days a week, an intensity that left almost no time for rest. And as mentioned, a sad reality was that most children did not attend school but worked in factories or fields to earn extra income for their families, bearing heavy responsibilities from a very young age. Regarding education, the landscape was also completely different. In 1860, the entire U.S. had only about 40 public high schools across such a vast area, indicating the limitations of the public education system. Most children attended private schools, church and community-supported schools, or were homeschooled by parents or tutors. One-room schoolhouses were the standard model in rural areas, where all ages learned together in a single space. In these schools, parents often built the facilities themselves, and teachers were paid in kind, such as food, wood, or agricultural products. By the end of 1919, there were about 190,000 one-room schoolhouses across the U.S., demonstrating the prevalence of this model. Learning focused on basic knowledge such as reading, writing, history, science, and mathematics, essential skills for life and work. Despite limited resources and difficult learning conditions, the illiteracy rate among young people in 1919 to 1920 was only about 6%, showing significant efforts in disseminating knowledge. The common teaching method was rote learning, with a deep belief that repetition is the beginning of all learning, emphasizing the necessity of memorization and practice. But life wasn't just about hard work and diligent study. With the advent of electric lights, cities transformed into magical playgrounds at night, dazzling with light and full of life. Sports like boxing, baseball, and horse racing attracted large crowds, creating a vibrant and enthusiastic atmosphere. This led to the construction of new, grander stadiums like Polo Grounds in New York and Shibe Park in Philadelphia, symbols of the developing sports scene. The first World Series was held in 1903 and the first Rose Bowl in 1902, marking the emergence of major sporting events that captured national attention. An unmissable entertainment destination was Coney Island in New York, a massive amusement paradise. It glittered with over 1 million electric lights at night, creating a magical and splendid scene. Along with famous amusement areas like Luna Park, Steeplechase Park, and Dreamland, offering countless thrilling rides, circuses, and unique performances for just 10 cents a turn, attracting millions of visitors each year. In the West, Rodeos kept the Wild West tradition alive, providing dramatic performances and extraordinary cowboy skills. A novel attraction at the time was the Nickelodeon, where flicks, movies, were shown for just 5 cents, a cheap and accessible form of entertainment. The first silent film with a coherent narrative, The Great Train Robbery, 1903, became a box office phenomenon, ushering in a new era for the seventh art and changing how people enjoyed stories. In music, ragtime and jazz began to dominate phonograph record sales after they were first sold in 1901, bringing fresh and vibrant tunes. However, cultural critics worried about the social decay these music genres might bring, indicating a shift in aesthetic and social perspectives along with the development of art. Additionally, people often spent time socializing with neighbors, reading books, writing letters, playing musical instruments, doing handicrafts like sewing and knitting and gardening, simple activities that fostered community bonds. Outdoor activities were also very popular, including walking, cycling, playing informal sports, or visiting parks and beaches to enjoy fresh air and natural scenery. Despite the many hardships, life still offered moments of joy, entertainment, and community connection. Of all the changes and inventions of the 1900s that we've discussed, what do you think had the most lasting impact on American life, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Racial discrimination and the fight for equality. The 20th century dawned, but the heavy burden of racial discrimination still weighed on American society, a stain on the nation's history. In 1896, a Supreme Court decision legalized discrimination. The Plessy v. Ferguson case legalized the separate but equal policy. This was, in reality, just a euphemism to mask brutal and overt racial segregation. As a result, whites-only signs became ubiquitous, from schools, hospitals, and restaurants to public transportation, clearly dividing society. Every public space, from parks to beaches, adhered to this principle, stripping people of color of their freedom and dignity. Jim Crow laws established a deeply and cruelly segregated society, not just legally, but in practice. These laws also turned a blind eye to white violence, especially the barbaric and horrific acts of lynching against African Americans. In the 1890s, a terrifying statistic showed that over 200 African Americans were lynched each year in the Deep South, often without trial, merely on suspicion or simply because of their skin color. Black men also lost their right to vote through new state constitutions promoting white supremacy, stripping them of their most basic citizenship rights. Jim Crow regulations restricted interaction between black and white people to absurd and tragically humorous levels, such as prohibiting playing checkers together in Birmingham, Alabama. Even the name Jim Crow originated from a minstrel character, a simplistic and humorous caricature of African Americans, symbolizing white control and the denial of power, maintaining their social dominance. To protect themselves from constant oppression and violence, African Americans began a slow but resilient migration from the Deep South, where they endured the heaviest injustices. They established all-black towns in Florida, Missouri, Arkansas, and along the Mississippi River, creating self-sufficient, safe communities to escape persecution. Against this backdrop, black leaders tirelessly worked to improve the economic and social standing of African Americans, fighting for a better future. Booker T. Washington, a prominent and pragmatic figure, president of the esteemed Tuskegee Institute, founded the Urban League in 1907, focusing on helping black individuals find employment and adapt to urban life, providing the necessary skills for them to become self-reliant. Washington believed in economic development and vocational education as a path for black people to advance. However, the one who played a crucial role in challenging the system of racial segregation more directly and resolutely was W.E.B. Du Bois, an outstanding writer and scholar with profound vision. He founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, which later became one of the strongest voices for racial justice in America. Du Bois made a haunting and accurate prophecy in 1904 that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, a prediction of the decades-long struggle for equality and justice. In 1900, there were 8,833,000 African Americans, making up 11.6% of the total U.S. population. However, their lives were full of hardships. The average life expectancy for African Americans was only 33 years, an alarming figure, comparable to a farmer in India in the early 19th century, while for white people, it was 48 years. This terrible disparity in life expectancy clearly reflected the lack of health care, nutrition, and living conditions. Although slavery had been abolished in 1865, African Americans still did not have true equal rights and faced chronic poverty and violence daily. Nevertheless, the black middle class tirelessly strove to improve living conditions for their people, focusing on education and self-reliance, laying a strong foundation for the great civil rights movements that followed, transforming Du Bois' prophecy into a comprehensive and meaningful struggle. The United States' position on the world stage. Stepping into the 20th century, the United States began to assert its position on the international stage. President McKinley declared the success of the open-door policy, believing it would stabilize the economy and lead to a glorious new era. He argued that isolation is no longer possible or even desirable. This policy was proposed to counteract the continuous cycles of economic boom and bust of the 19th century, which had caused many social problems. It called for all nations worldwide to abolish tariffs and open up to each other regarding raw materials and investment, promoting global trade. However, McKinley's open-door policy was severely tested in the Philippines. After the Spanish-American War, the United States transformed from a liberating force into a new invader. The Philippine uprising against the U.S. resulted in more casualties than the Spanish-American War itself, with thousands of Americans and over 16,000 Filipinos killed in battle, and another 100,000 Filipinos dying from starvation due to crop burning. This war revealed a deep contradiction in U.S. policy. On one hand, it opposed European imperialism, while on the other, it promoted its own economic and cultural values to other nations. Nevertheless, Philippine Governor William Howard Taft suppressed the uprising not through military means, but with relatively liberal policies, granting Filipinos suffrage and self-governance. In September 1901, a fateful event occurred. President McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist named Leon Czolgosz. This brought a highly influential figure onto the political stage, Theodore Roosevelt. At 45, he became the youngest president in U.S. history. Though unpopular with New York's political bosses, he asserted himself as an enemy of corruption and a protector of public interest. Roosevelt strongly used presidential power to protect the public interest. He intervened in miners' strikes, ensuring workers' rights. He also pursued a strong conservation policy, doubling the number of national parks and adding millions of acres to national forests, laying the foundation for environmental protection in the U.S. On the international stage, Roosevelt strengthened the U.S.'s position as a world power. He declared his desire to see America as the dominant power on the Pacific Rim and sent the Great White Fleet around the world to showcase the strength of the U.S. Navy. His decisive seizure of the Panama Canal from Colombia also demonstrated his speak softly but carry a big stick approach in foreign policy. The 20th century also opened with many global upheavals. Rebellions against foreign domination occurred everywhere, such as the Boxer Rebellion in China in 1900, the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, shocked Europe when a white nation was defeated by one of the colored races. Signs of the British Empire's weakening began to appear, with Australia granted independence in 1901, and the Boer War, damaging Britain's international reputation. At the same time, threats of war began to form in Europe, especially in the Balkans, with Austria-Hungary's annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina in 1905, leading to the formation of the terrorist group Mlada Bosna, Young Bosnia, the seeds for World War I. The year 1900 was truly a pivotal year, where the past met the future, full of dizzying changes and emotional stories. From technological revolutions to profound social struggles, America laid the foundation for what we see today. We hope this journey back in time has given you deeper insights into an unforgettable era. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. If you liked this video and want to explore more nostalgic stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to Who Remembers, and share this video with your friends and family. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.